Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and to our witnesses, we appreciate you all being with us. I represent Tennessee, and in 2020, Tennesseans really came to appreciate the resiliency of their networks. In 2020, we had tornadoes, we had storms, we had floods, we had other natural disasters, and then on Christmas Day, we had the bombing. A car bomb was detonated outside the AT&T downtown building in Nashville, and that is where the switching capabilities for much of the Southeast is located. And at that point, we had people in several states who were affected by that Christmas Day bombing. And during my work here in Congress, whether in the House or here in the Senate, working on broadband infrastructure resiliency is something that has taken a good bit of my efforts. And we have the Internet Exchange Act, which recently passed the Senate as part of a larger package and will help in building these resilient and redundant networks. And right now in Tennessee, what we know is that we have 400,000 Tennesseans that are living in a census block that has no provider for service that hits that 25.3 mark. And the average cost of stringing that fiber is $30,000 to $40,000 per mile. And then to trench that fiber, it is $50,000 to $70,000 per mile. So the costs add up quickly. Tennesseans realize this, and they're very concerned. We've heard from some of our Tennesseans about Congress considering this 100 by 100 standard for broadband when they really have not been able to get the 25.3 FCC minimum. So, Mr. Law, I'd like for you to talk about what this would do. If you had the 100 standard, what that would do to rural communities that are still trying to get the 25.3.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn, for your question. I totally agree that in terms of broadband availability and capability, the focus of any infrastructure program has to begin with focusing those dollars targeted on those who do not have service today. And if the standard is indeed 100 meg symmetrical, that does not mean that somebody who has 75 meg or 100 by 10 or some other thing has insufficient broadband. They may have adequate broadband, but I think any funding program would need to begin. Let's begin with the hardest first. And the ones you just described in Tennessee, I think, would meet my definition of what's the hardest first. Then the second part is to make it available. The second part is what are the capabilities that we want to have associated with that, along with both the affordability and then finally the sustainability. So it'd really be kind of a four-part process: availability, capability, affordability, and sustainability. But I would propose you begin with how do you solve for the 25.3 customers first.
Thank you for that. Mr. Edelstein, let me ask you this, and this is an area we've talked about in the past. Should we stay technologically neutral when we're distributing broadband funding and looking at broadband access?
Well, absolutely. I think, your point, fiber costs 10 times more than wireless to deploy, according to the Carmel Group study that I've seen. Capital outlays per individual are much, much higher. And you actually may not get the service that you ultimately want. I mean, if you've got a lot of resiliency issues that could come with particularly aerial fiber, and as you mentioned, it's much more expensive if you bury it. And Denny was mentioning it gets more expensive the more resilient it is. The beauty of not doing 100-100 but being technologically neutral is that you can then pick more resilient technology that might actually be less expensive in this case. Because instead of having to restore service at $30,000 a mile to $60,000 a mile, you only have to restore service to one site, to a tower, to a water tower, wherever the facility might be. get the backhaul to that, get the power to that when the power goes down. If you have a fiber network that you spent all this money on, all of a sudden there's no power, nobody can get broadband in their home because those require, fiber to the home requires power in the house. Getting power to the tower, getting power to the wireless transmission facility is a lot easier to do. So not only is it more expensive to put in, but if you ever have a problem, you've got to restore it. It's more expensive to restore. And where's the money going to come to pay for that? Once Congress has opened up its wallet for this enormous amount on a non-resilient network potentially. So when you're spending these monies, make sure you target the most efficient technologies, ones that are the most resilient. You can reward these things. Now, getting higher upload speeds is wonderful. Make that a priority too, but don't make that a gating factor where you cut out all other technologies. You cut out fixed wireless. You cut out mobile wireless. You cut out other options that can do it cheaper, that can actually do it better, and that can be more resilient. That's why Congress traditionally has always been technologically flexible and hasn't set standards in statute that lock it down. Admirable though the standard might be, whatever, 100 is all what we all want. Someday that's going to be very low, even for wireless networks. But today, you could end up using those funds to architect a network that isn't what you had in mind. And in fact, you won't reach many unserved customers because you spent so much on an inefficient, expensive technology that in the end, you don't get everywhere you need to go.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.